Hello, this is Susan Poss again, and I'm working still in section 9.6. This video is going to be looking at two problems that involve interest. So let me read you the first one, and then we'll talk through some of the things here. Kara has had $40,000 invested for 1 year. Some in a savings account, which paid 7%, and the rest in a high-risk stock, which yielded 12% for the year. If her interest income last year was $3,550, how much did she have in the savings account, and how much did she invest in the stock? All right, so this one is going to use a little formula called principal times rate equals interest. Some of you have learned it, I equals PRT, principal times rate times time. And the thing in this problem that eliminates the time element is that we're working with 1 year. And you're going to see that in all of these problems, that time is going to be 1 year. So we're leaving out the T in PRT. So it's just principal times rate is equal to interest. And again, this time, when we discussed distance, rate, time, the rate was miles per hour, feet per second, meters per minute. This time, when we talk about the rate, it is always the percent. And you and I are always going to write that percent in its decimal form. That's very important. So before you do anything, be sure that you know how to convert percents into decimals. Okay, so I lifted this again from the textbook, and you can see here that the author has decided to start out by letting X represent the amount invested at 7%, and 40,000 minus X be representative of the amount invested at 12%. So again, look here at the question, how much did she have in the savings account, and how much did she have in the stock? So we're looking for two things, and it's an amount of money that she had invested in these two different vehicles. So X is the 7% amount of money, and 40,000 minus X is the 12% amount of money. And again, this is a trick that you saw back in the distance, rate, time problems in a previous video. When you don't know, you know a total amount, in this case we know a total 40,000 amount, but we don't know how it's split up, then you assign X to one amount, and then you start with that total 40,000, in this case, subtract off X, and that will represent how much is left over for the other amount of, in this case, money invested. All right, so for the interest on the, which one do I want? The 7%. We're going to take, I like to do it in reverse. I'm going to take the 7%, I'm going to write it in decimal form, and multiply it by the amount that we invested at 7%, and that is going to be the interest at 7%. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the second amount. It was a 12%, so 0.12 times the other amount, 40,000 minus X, and that is going to be the interest at 12%. So my equation is going to be, I'm going to take the interest at 7%, I'm going to add to that the interest at 12%, and that's going to total up to this 3,550 total interest. If her interest income last year was, so that's her total interest income. All right, so I'm just going to go back and pick up these two expressions here. There's the interest at 7%. Here's the interest at 12%, and those two together, add up to 3,550. So now you just start doing the arithmetic, the math. So I'm going to distribute this 0.12 times 40,000, and I've already done that. That was 4,800. Notice that as you distribute here, you also distribute here over that second multiplier times x. Okay, so at this point you should see these two like terms. They both contain the variable x. Notice when you subtract those, you get a 0.05x, and that it is negative because the 0.12 is a larger amount, absolute value-wise, than the 0.07. All right, so the next step is to subtract off this 4,800. And you'll notice that that gives me a negative value, so that when I finish this up and I'm dividing by this negative 0.05 on the left and also dividing by that negative 0.05 on the right, I'm going to end up, notice these cancel out, the variable x is still there. I'm going to end up with a positive number out here, and that positive number turned out to be $25,000. And of course, this is the amount invested at 7%. And then the other amount is the 40,000 minus x, which of course is 40,000 minus 25,000. And that turned out to be 15,000. And that is the amount invested at 12%. Okay, so if you wanted to go back and do a quick check on that, you could take 0.07 times x, which was the 25,000, and 0.12 times the, 15,000. That was the other amount, 40,000 minus x. And I haven't done that. Hold on, let me grab my calculator and do 7% of 25,000. And that gives me 1,750. And let me do 12% of 15,000. And that gives me 1,800. And of course, if we add these back together, it brings us back to the 3,550. So that's a little check. All right, quickly, I have another one here. It's very similar. So we're going to read through it, and we're going to try and set it up like we did the previous one. Mark has had $15,000 invested for 1 year, some in a low-risk stock at 4%, and the rest in a high-risk stock at 15%. If his investment has earned $1,997 in interest, how much did he invest in the low-risk stock, and how much in the high risk? So again, remember how I like to go to the question, how much at the low risk stock and how much at the high risk stock. So that tells me how to get started. So I'm going to let X represent the amount invested at 4%. Remember, that's the low risk. And then that little trick again, if you don't know how something is divvied up into two quantities, you let X be one quantity and then you come back and pick up the total and subtract off X, and that will be what's left over. This will be the amount invested at 15%. Remember, this was the high risk. Okay, so we're going to take interest at 4% and add it to interest at 15%, and that should total up to this 1,997. Now remember the formula for interest, it was principal times rate, and we're ignoring time here because time is 1 year equals interest. So I'm going to take the principal, which is X, multiply it by the rate, which I'm converting into decimal form. And here I'm going to take the principal, which is 15,000 minus X, and multiply it by the rate, which again I always put into decimal form. And add those two together, and that should total up to 1,997. So again, from here on out, once you get the equation set, it's just a matter of doing the arithmetic, doing the algebra. Okay, so there is, that's what it looks like after I distribute over this parentheses here. And notice again we have two terms that are like terms, so I'm going to work on subtracting and getting that difference, and noticing that that's going to be a negative value because the 0.15 is the larger absolute value. And then subtracting away to isolate the variable. And what did that give me? Negative 253. And dividing by negative 0.11. That leaves the variable X. These cancel out. And when I divided that out, what did I get? Where is my answer? 2,300. Positive 2,300. And this is in dollars. Invested at 4%, and then 15,000 minus X, which is 15,000 minus this 2,300, which turned out to be 12,700, is the amount invested, excuse me, at 15%. So this was the high-risk stock, and the other one is the low-risk stock. And again, if you wanted to do a quick check, I'm not going to finish this out because I don't want this video to be so long, but you would take the 2,300 at 4% and the 12,700 at, what was that, 15%. Well, hang on, I'm in it now, might as well finish it. So 2,300 times 0.04 gives me $92 in interest, and 12,700 at 15% gives me $19.05 in interest, and I hope when I add 1905 and 92 back together, yeah, there it is, 1997. So there's your quick check. All right, so I hope that helps you a little bit with interest.